morning. Thank you to the conference organisers for inviting me over from the United Kingdom to speak to you today. I'm a patient, so I'd like to give a perspective from the community of people who live with diabetes every day, and perhaps give some thoughts and counterpoints to a number of the lectures that you've already received today, and pick up on some of the points that have been raised about activity, sedentary lifestyle, behaviours, and in particular Adele's talk on is sugar the enemy. I think that was very interesting. But just to give you a bit of context, so I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 3 years ago at the age of 44, with no history to my knowledge of diabetes in my family at that point. And as I'm sure many of you will know, learning about diabetes from Professor Google is very, very easy. There are lots of resources that can teach you everything that you want to know about the condition itself. There are very few resources available to help people who have diabetes learn about the daily issues that come with living with a chronic condition. And of course, for many people who've been brought up living with diabetes or have had diabetes in their family, they don't notice the daily issues because they're part of a normal life. So there are very few resources that are available out there to help people newly diagnosed understand what those daily issues are and then learn how to cope with them. So we founded something called the Diabetes Online Community in 2012, which is a weekly moderated tweet chat using social media to engage people from around the world who have diabetes in a conversation. And the use of social media has grown so quickly that the ability to reach people was even beyond our wildest imagining. So in the first week, for those of you that use social media in this room, and will understand some of these numbers, we reached 750,000 people in 1 hour. That's 750,000 people who had diabetes, who shared messages, shared stories with each other in an hour. By the end of the first month, we'd reached 6.7 million people, and as you can see, the numbers grow very, very quickly. It soon became apparent that there was more of a need in more countries than just having an English language social media tweet chat. So we got together some people from around the world who wanted to engage, and we set up social media and communities and outreach engagement opportunities now in over 26 countries. The English language version of what we do has so far, in just over 2 years, now reached over 80 million people, which is quite incredible. That's the cumulative number of people who've shared in the conversations. So if you imagine using the power of that to share stories, share messages, share healthcare advice about living with diabetes, it's a mechanism for reaching millions of people with very simple messages. Twitter, for those of you that don't know, is a smartphone version of using SMS messaging or text messaging. It's 140 characters. So you haven't got a lot of space to get across a message. And if we can do this week in, week out, all around the world, I'm sure there's room here for healthcare professionals to be using this technology, as well as listening to these conversations and learning from your patients, learning the language they use, learning the solutions that they've come up with to daily problems. And I'd urge all of you to actually join in and have a look and just observe to see what goes on there. Out of these communities, we're now up to 14 so far around the world, and we're looking to set up more everywhere we go. So if anybody's interested in helping set up an Arabic language social media outreach program, please do come and see me, because we'd love to get one set up. I obviously don't speak, read or write Arabic, so it's a little bit difficult for me. It's even more difficult for me to test the Google translation to make sure it makes any sense whatsoever. So I haven't really tried too much on that front. Now, a lot of the things that we've learned out of these conversations that have now been going on for nearly 2 or just over 2 years is that there's a universal set of issues that face people with diabetes all over the world, and irrespective of language, culture, or for that matter, reimbursement model with the local healthcare system, there are seemingly 5 universal services that everybody who lives with diabetes thinks their respective governments and healthcare systems are failing to deliver to them. And those are the 5 up there. Quite obviously, everybody with diabetes has an issue with food. All of us have to count our food, obsess about our food, understand food, know what's good and what's bad, and those messages change almost on a daily basis depending upon which country you're in. One day coffee's good, the next day coffee's bad. One day butter's good, the next day butter's bad. Today we heard from Adele that sugar's bad. So food clearly is a big issue for everybody with diabetes, and I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody in this audience, obsessing about anything leads to mental health issues, and there are many studies all over the world that show a high prevalence and correlation between mental health issues and living with a chronic condition. Equally, there's a paucity of peer support groups globally. There are very, very few patient-led peer support or community engagement groups where people with chronic conditions and diabetes can get together and share their own experiences without those groups being managed by healthcare professionals or by institutions. And equally, as the evidence and the data shows, structured peer support programs globally universally fail. And perhaps the clue there is in the title: structured peer support programs delivered by institutions fail. So peer support is a requirement of 400 million people around the world living with diabetes today. Delivering peer support is incredibly complex and very, very difficult if you're a healthcare professional or an institution. But how do you fund and empower communities to congregate and deliver support for each other if you can't control the outcomes, if you can't measure the outcomes, and if they're not a responsible financial body that can take the funding? So there's an essential dilemma there built into the system, perhaps one that some of you can help overcome. The fourth area is end-of-life care for people with diabetes. There's an awful lot of fear globally about how and who is going to look after you as your diabetes continues to affect you. Whether you're 26 and in the last stages of your diabetes and you've got retinopathy and you're on kidney transplant with dialysis, or if you're 86 with undiagnosed type 2 for the last 15 years and you're in the same state, you're both reaching the same end goal in terms of the requirements for your care. And there is an awful lot of fear in the community about how that care is delivered, who's going to deliver that care. This all underlines the emotional aspects of living with a chronic condition. And then last but not least, and why we founded something called Team Blood Glucose, is activity and diabetes. Most people, it seems, who have any form of diabetes, and certainly those who are insulin dependent or on a class of drugs that many of you will well know, that can induce or cause hypoglycemia, have an abject fear of doing any form of activity because they're scared of having a hypoglycemic episode. And should they try to do some exercise and then have a hypoglycemic episode, they're then too scared to ever want to do it again. And so a vicious cycle of sedentary behaviours increase the likelihood of comorbidities with living with diabetes. So we founded Team Blood Glucose to help people who have diabetes learn how to be more active. And as an example, I was doing some reading earlier on today. This room is a perfect example. 2% of people living in Egypt claim to do more than 30 minutes of exercise a day. 2%. So that means in a room of 200 people here, there are 4 of you who do anything more than half an hour's exercise a day. That means there's nearly 200 people in this room who should all get up now and walk around the building and sit back down again and achieve their extra 1,000 steps for the day. These are small things that make a huge difference to living with a chronic condition. So what we do is provide opportunity, education and access to people who are living with diabetes to learn how to safely engage and be more active. We help deliver education programs. We help bring together groups of people who've never met before around a common activity to share their stories, to share their own motivations, to share their own goals, and provide from within that community a peer support group. Bring people together, help them build relationships with each other, help them understand that they can achieve their goals, whether that's doing a walk in the park, a 5K run, or an Ironman. If they have a goal and they have a group of people who are just like them, who meet and are in the local community that can act to support each other, they will be much, much more successful in achieving those goals. So to the talk earlier from Peter about providing pedometers, getting people together, having them go for a walk in the park together is much more effective than trying to tell somebody you must do 10,000 steps a day because it's good for you and I know best. Get 10 people together from the same community who can sit around and have a cup of tea and a piece of cake and have a conversation and say, come on, we've all got to go out and do 10,000 steps this week, is much more powerful and much more sustainable. So it's a very simple message from us. Create communities of interest, create communities within your patient groups that want to get together, provide them with the opportunity and then the resources and the space to create their own peer support groups, and they will be successful. And I think, as it was mentioned earlier on, your job is to guide them in achieving those goals and provide and turn their need for information, filter it through your experience and deliver it as wisdom so that they can live longer, healthier, more economic and sustainable lives. And just to finish off, there is a video that I wanted to show you, but we don't have an internet connection here, so I can't get onto YouTube to show it to you. But to give you an example of what is possible, for the last 2 years we've run a cycling event that goes from the European Association for the Study of Diabetes conference venue to venue each year. So last year we cycled from Brussels as the first one to Barcelona, and this year we cycled from Barcelona to Vienna. And next year, of course, we'll be cycling from Vienna to Stockholm, where I hope to meet some of you there. The point being that we brought together 30 to 80 people with diabetes from all over the world who aren't elite cyclists, who have all sorts of forms of diabetes, type 1, type 2, and some people who'd come along because their healthcare professionals had told them they were at risk of developing diabetes. And with the technology, with CGM, with pumps, with the right support, and with a group of people who are sharing a goal and want to support each other, everybody started and everybody finished, riding thousands of miles across Europe and going over some of the highest mountains in Europe. So if we can do that, bring complete strangers together to do it, I'm sure as UEDA you can bring together your communities of people with diabetes and help them achieve their goals, help make your lives a lot easier in terms of managing their diabetes as well. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, I shall be here for the rest of the conference, happy to take them. Thank you.